Good afternoon. This is December 10th on a foggy, rainy day. This is Mike, and this is the Cancer Cottage. Today we're going to be talking about framing, so I'll meet you up at the cottage.
I wanna cozy up with you. Fire golden and Joni's blue. I wanna float away with you. River running to somewhere new with you.
Well, this will be my next to last review video, and then I'll jump right into live videos going forward. And those should be shorter, probably 10 minutes at the max. But I'm bringing people up to date because I'm halfway finished building the cottage. And when I started it in April, it's now December, I did not have a video camera nor the idea of trying to create a video series. I follow four people online, four groups online who are building cottages. Two of them are restoring stone cottages in Italy, in the Italian Alps, and one in Scotland and one in the States. But this one has a little bit of a twist, as I mentioned in my introduction early on, that building this cottage is very important to my battle against multiple myeloma and renal failure. Also, it's got a twist that I'm a complete novice, almost complete, near novice about construction, and now I'm the general contractor and doing most of the work myself, and that should make things interesting. So today I'm talking about framing. As I just said, my experience with framing has been very, very limited. We had a house back in 1998, I think it was, where a contractor built the shell and we did interior walls, did some framing, and I won't go into that story. That was almost a disaster. The kids were small. It was a very cold winter. The contractor messed up some things, and it was really tricky. But besides that, I really haven't framed any walls. I've done some remodeling kind of things. So before I even started this project, my son, who is a cabinet maker and used to be a framing carpenter, brought me some textbooks that I didn't read cover to cover, but I read chapters of things that are important. And then, like with this video, I turned to YouTube for instructions. Usually, I watch a YouTube video about a day or two in advance of me doing something. And I knew there was going to be some big challenges. The other thing about me is I'm impatient and I like to do things quickly, and that makes my carpentry work sometimes sloppy. You know, if I cut a board, it's not quite right, let's just fudge it and keep going. But I decided with this project, I was going to be much more strict and going against my own nature of trying to be precise. Oh, I just see this lane here. This is one of the first things I did. I cut out a triangle based on the roof. Yeah, the roof, it's a 1412 pitch roof. So I had all the angles, and I had two or three I cut out very precisely so I could get all my cuts exactly right. Or not exactly, but close. Well, and then I started building the walls, and as I'm speaking, I'm going to be showing some pictures that I had on my phone that may, I hope, correlate a little bit with what I'm saying. And I built my first wall and raised it without much difficulty. And then that was a very small wall. And then as I started building these bigger walls, my framing is 2x6, which is common these days. And once you put in all the called blocking, all the lumber, all the headers above doors, these walls get to be pretty heavy, and it became a challenge. Now I have an old Land Rover Defender 1990 with a electric winch on the bumper. And I used that winch over and over to pull these walls up. Now, one of the hard parts was going to be this cottage has gabled walls, two very tall walls, 20 feet to the peak. And from what I read and what I watched on YouTube, they don't have any YouTubes for doing it yourself, all by yourself. So that was the challenge, was that the tall walls, it's better to do as much as you can on the ground, because you build them on the ground, then you raise them. So you put the external sheeting on. So then that really adds weight to the walls. I keep estimating, I'd say 1,400 pounds that I had to get these walls from on the ground to raised up. And I had to do it by myself, or at least I thought by myself. So that's one of the things that kept me awake a lot at night, is how I was going to get those walls up. And my cottage is built on a slope. On the north side, the slope goes straight down. So now the wall is more like 30 feet, or to the peak is about 30 feet from the ground because the ground slopes. The other one slopes upward. So I wasn't real worried about the sloping upward wall, but the sloping downward wall, there's no way you could put a winch to pull that wall up because you're pulling down. So the physics just wouldn't work out. But I came up with a system for that wall where I put a beam at the top of the sidewalls at 10 feet to run the cable over that beam. And then we had a forklift here, an extended forklift that we'd use to unload a truck with roofing panels. So I pushed the wall up as far as I could. Then my wife came and joined me and used the winch to try to pull the wall all the way up. But I didn't want to put a lot of weight on that beam because, once the wall got high enough, the cable would lift off that beam and it'd be fine. But somehow we got too much weight on that beam, and the beam broke. And I didn't hear it break. I'm in the forklift. And the sidewalls, which were perfectly straight, because that beam connecting them broke, it pulled them in, and it captured the gable wall halfway up, halfway down. It was a mess, and I didn't know what was going on. And I had to get out and study. And finally I saw the walls had moved in a couple of inches on each side, and now it was pinning the gable wall. It was a real mess. So we used the forklift again. My son came over and helped this time, and we finally got the walls all the way stood up. Then the second gable wall I built on the ground. You can only build one at a time because they overlap. The second one I was going to do all by myself, and I did. I built it on the ground. And fortunately, due to the angle, I was able to use the Defender winch better. Now, one of the problems was you could still, even at that angle, you couldn't build a gable wall straight up because of the angle of the cable. And I knew I had to jack it up. I had what's called a wall jack that you needed at least two because the gable wall is so big. So I already had one, and I'd ordered a second one. It came that day. And I started jacking up that gable wall, and the brand new wall jack would not work. It had a little bit of defect. It's cast iron in the lip of it, and that made it not grab the wood. You jack this up on a 2x4, and it kept slipping and slipping and slipping. So that was a real problem. I sent it back the next day and got my money back. But I want to get that wall up that day. So my other alternative was what's called a high jack. It's a car jack that can jack up to probably about 5 feet. So I used the wall jack on one side, and I'm doing all this all by myself. If the wall fell on me, it would kill me. Jacking it up on one side with the wall jack and jacking up on the other side with the car jack. And the car jack is starting to become really unstable. So I went up, and my Defender, I started cranking up the winch, and the Defender started sliding across the road. And then I went and put big rocks under the wheels so it wouldn't slide, and try to jack it up a little bit more, and try to pull on the winch again. And again, the Defender was dragging the rocks with it, and I just knew that cable was going to break or something. So I came down and jacked up the wall again, another probably 6 inches. And that car jack was very unstable. And I did not get anywhere under the wall. I knew it would fall on me and kill me if I did. So I went up and I pulled and pulled and pulled. And I started to feel a little wobbling in the wall. And finally it just came off the ground. And it stood up. Now the other thing I did that I learned from the first wall, and I'd seen this in either a video or one of the YouTubes I follow, was along the base of the wall. You build the wall laying down. And on the base of the wall, I put 8 big brass hinges. I screwed the wall to the floor on those hinges. I mentioned in a previous video that the architect had made these 2x8 mud seals, these boards along the bottom, and that came in very handy. It gave me space to screw these hinges in. Otherwise, what happens when you go to raise the wall, the bottom kicks out and goes forward. I got wooden braces, but the other wall I had wooden braces, and it's pushed the braces off. And it was a real mess until we got that straightened out. So that was a lot of my framing challenges. Now, one other thing, speaking of the mud seals, I'm going to go back again to the very beginning. The mud seals are a treated wood that's part of the concrete framing that goes down first. And you'll see in some of the pictures, they had dozens of big bolts. And the concrete guy wasn't sure how I was supposed to do this because there was just no way you could drill holes in the bottom board. It's called the bottom plate of the wall. All the holes to match the bolts. There's just no way to line that up right. So we talked to the architect, and the architect said, well, you can put the mud plate down with all the bolts, and then the engineer said it's okay to put a solid wood on top of that and then nail into that mud plate to hold them together, the two boards, rather than the bolt going all the way through the bottom of the wall. So I had to then come in and cut off all those bolts, and then there is no way that a wooden board would fit on top of these nuts. It'd be rocky. So I had to take each board and route out the shape of the nut in the bottom of the board, and then it would fit snug. And that board became the bottom plate or the bottom board of my walls. If you're haven't done any construction, this may not make any sense. So the walls have a bottom plate and top plate, and they go up together. The bottom plate, I had to cut holes in the bottom to match the nuts, and that took hours and hours and hours of work. So that was another thing about my framing. Now, one good thing, after I got around and got all the walls up, including the gable walls, we even had the roof on, we had the loft on, all these things were done. I found my cottage has two large French doors facing the lake. And I've been pricing those out, and those were going to be about $4,000 or $5,000 each to buy. And I'm on a very tight budget. But then I saw on Facebook Marketplace, someone in a town not too far from us had two really nice exterior French doors. They were old, and they were almost exactly the dimensions I thought of my openings. So I went down and picked them up, brought them home. So that saved me a ton of money. And then I finally got them out of my storage when I'm getting ready to start. I was finished framing the wall on this side, and the doors were like 2 or 3 inches too wide. And I studied and studied what to do. And to make a long story short, the only thing I could do was rebuild my eastern walls, the one that faces the lake. And that took a week to tear out the old wall and put in a new one with an opening big enough, a rough opening for these doors. But the doors are saving me 10 grand. So I couldn't, I probably wasted several $100s in all the wood I had in the wall. But the one thing that was reassuring to me that it had been probably 3 months since I built the walls the first time. When I went back and built the same walls again, my carpentry skills had advanced a lot. Even at the very beginning, as I said, I was trying not to be sloppy, and I am going against my own natural grain. But see, in that process of time, how much I'd learned about framing walls, and so that was very reassuring. So I'm trying to think if there's any other framing stories I need to tell. But again, I had some still photos. I don't know if I had any videos on my phone of some of this process. And as I'm talking, hopefully some of these, I will be able to edit this and bring some of those photos up. So next time, I'm going to be talking about the roof panels. That was the other big thing. Besides the two things that kept me awake for months were the gable walls, getting those raised without getting killed, and these roofing panels. These roofing panels, the architect called for was SIPs, structural insulated panels, they were 10 inches thick. These are styrofoam with heavy OSB, this plywood-like board on both sides. So the panels are 8 feet wide, most of them 8 feet wide and 16 feet long. So when you weigh that, that's 400 to 500 pounds. So I'm laying in bed thinking, how in the heck am I by myself going to get these panels 20 feet up in the air? And I thought of all kinds of pulley systems. I've done some crazy things with pulleys and my winch. I thought about building some kind of track with rollers where I could pull them up onto the roof. And it just kept me awake. But anyway, next time I'll tell you that story of how we solved that problem and moved along. Because I do have people following this who either have cancer or other health problems, I do want to comment now and then slightly, not to overdo it, about how that dovetails into my story. And some of the challenges, there's nothing down about building the cottage. It's saved my life. I was diagnosed 5 years ago and went into a bone marrow transplant. I think I mentioned this on the very introduction, and had to go in quarantine for 6 months, came out of quarantine 2 months, and then COVID hit, had to go back in quarantine for 2 years. And I was home alone, never left except for medical appointments. And that was very, very depressing. Also, the fact that my bone marrow transplant had failed, and my days looked numbered. And it was during that period of time, I also, well, two things I did. I wrote a book. I've written several books, but I wrote a novel, which kept my mind, if you sit in a house alone after having a busy career for 38 years, and suddenly one day you're sitting in your house alone, you feel rotten, your mind just starts to wonder, you have no friends, no one to talk to hardly, and you can become very, very depressed. And I think the psychological part of fighting cancer or any chronic disease is very, very important. So it was in that transition time, or during that dark time, that I call it my valley, that I decided to write the book, and also decided to start to build a cottage. But it took 2 years, as I described before, of getting permits and things. But building a cottage keeps me physically strong. I'm not as strong as I used to be. I get tired very easily due to chemo I'm on. But it has its challenges. The chemo causes me to be quite ill several days a week. Well, a few weeks ago it was every other day, and it has improved recently to about 1 day a week. And now this has been twice this week, but I woke up, I was going to work on the cottage today, but woke up quite ill. It's like a stomach flu that lasts for several hours, that keeps you in the bathroom and lying down, you just feel rotten. But that's one of the challenges I've had. When I started working on a cottage, there's periods of time I was not doing well, and you come out, and as soon as you climb a ladder and start putting a board up, you got to run back to the house, go to the bathroom, lay down for a while, come back out, put a board up, run back to the bathroom, that kind of thing. But fortunately, that has been better in the last few weeks. Like I said, down to once or twice a week rather than every other day. Anyway, I'll be back next week. We're going to talk about how we got these giant SIP panels up. One little weak guy by himself. Well, it turned out not to be that way, but that's the way it looked. I wish I had video of that, because I watched probably 10 videos on YouTube of guys putting on these SIP panels, and it is a little frustrating, because every time they would do it, we're going to do it all by ourselves. And you get there and it's like 12 guys, manhandling these panels, plus a crane. And I thought, that's not my world. That's not the world I live in, where I'm trying to do everything by myself. But anyway, we got them up, and they're on, and we move on beyond that. Well, anyway, thanks for coming. I welcome anyone to come to this, especially people who are struggling with illnesses and feeling depressed and that kind of thing. You won't learn from my carpentry skills, but you might learn from my I don't know what you want to call it, endurance, or, proactive steps of trying to fight this. I never want to be in that dark valley again. All right, you have a good day.